Well, greetings, Boise State fans. Welcome on back. Bronco Nation News live here at BroncoNationNews.com on the social media channels of Bronco Nation News. Really excited about this episode as we break down some basketball. Yes, looks like we're going to have a basketball game on Wednesday night. Boise State traveling today to Reno, Nevada. Looking forward to this one. Quick shout out, rowpaint.com, the official paint and coatings company of Boise State Athletics. I'm sporting the shirt today. Appreciate their support. Don't forget, you can still get 10% off that concrete coating for your garage or your basement if you just check them out, rowpaint.com. That's ROE paint.com. And if you get it done by January, you can get 10% off. It's pretty affordable, so check them out, rowpaint.com. We're going to go straight to our guest, Chris Murray. Appreciate him for joining us, Nevada Sportsnet. You've seen him all over social media and covering Nevada for a long, long time. And you've been with Nevada Sportsnet for a couple years now, Chris, and obviously doing a great job there. And we appreciate you coming on to talk about this game tomorrow. And I guess that is the first thing we can say, right? It looks like there is going to be a game tomorrow.
Yeah, everything is on track from Nevada's perspective. Obviously, they were in a pause that made them miss their game Saturday against San Diego State. Maybe that was a good thing based on how the Aztecs beat up on the Colorado State Rams. But I think Nevada just wants to play some games. I mean, this is a team that's only played 3 Division I opponents in the last 42 days. So they are really itching to get out there. They are on track. They did go through a pause in early December where at least 6 of the coaches got COVID, and now this more recent one has been with the players. But yes, everything is good from Nevada's perspective right now, but obviously in the COVID era, everything's always a little bit fluid.
And I guess for both teams, it's going to kind of balance out because both teams have been in a COVID pause for the last 10 days or so, or whatever it's been. And I know Nevada just got out of their, quarantine, I guess, on Sunday, right? And they're only going to have two practices, yesterday and today, to play this game. Boise State, a couple more than that. They started on, last Friday, I believe. But, Leon Rice was saying that, a lot of the games he watches around the country, that first game or two after a pause, teams look sluggish. They look tired. They just don't play great. And so the fact that both these teams are in similar spots probably balances out any advantage for the COVID pause.
Yeah, just Nevada hasn't been very active of late. As I mentioned, 3 games in 42 days is really tough to go through. The last time they played wasn't too long ago, I guess. They played a New Year's Day game against New Mexico. And they looked all right in that game. They won by 9 points at home, which is kind of, probably what you would expect against a team like the Lobos. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Nevada is a little sluggish, if they're a little rusty, if they're not as sharp as they normally would be, just because of the inaction basically since the beginning of December. That's really when things hit. They actually played a game without Coach Alford, without associate head coach Craig Neal against Pepperdine, and they thought they were going to try and push through. And then they had to cancel a couple of non-conference games. It's a team that missed 3 non-conference games because of COVID issues. Now, they did get to make that up by going to Kansas December 29th, and that was a really good experience for the Wolfpack, even though they lost that game by 27 points. So, yeah, I don't think you're going to see the sharpest Wolfpack that you're expected to see at this point this season. But it's kind of been a hit or miss season for Nevada. They have not been as good as everyone projected, picked to finish 3rd in the preseason poll. Right now, they're probably the 7th or 8th best team in the conference. They got off to a really poor start, 1-4. They kicked off one of their best players, and since then, they have played much, much better. They just had to go through these pauses a couple times.
Now, they could be last in the Mountain West, and Boise State fans would still not want to play them with how the last couple of years have gone, and with Sherfield and Cambridge and what they've done against them. And we'll get to that here in a few minutes. But what about the atmosphere in the crowd? I know different arenas are doing different things in terms of the seating and capacity and whether fans are coming back anyway. I mean, I've been to that place, 3-4 times, and it's usually just absolutely packed and rocking. What has it been like, and what will it be like tomorrow night?
Yeah, they do have full attendance. There are no restrictions on the amount of people who are allowed in Lawler Event Center. You do have to be vaccinated to get into the building, so that did knock down attendance to a degree. They lost about 300 season ticket holders, but it's not what it's been. They're averaging just under 7,000 fans per game, 95, and honestly, it's probably closer to about 4,500. If you remember those Eric Musselman days, you're talking about a legitimate 11,000 fans per game. So it has petered off in this Coach Alford era. Now, part of that is just the team hasn't been as good as it was under Coach Musselman. Part of it is just the hit and miss nature of this season. I think that's kind of taken some enthusiasm out of the Wolfpack fan base. And then part of it is they just got off to that bad start. And I think the fans didn't jump off board, but you're really only catering to the hardcore fans right now. So it's not going to be this live live jump in atmosphere. I do think, people are going to be excited to be able to go out to a game just based on how few home games have been played this year. But it'll be an advantage, but not the kind of advantage that maybe Boise State has been used to over the last half decade.
Well, what do you make of the recent battles between Boise State and Nevada? They've had some go back and forth, and obviously some good battles with the Martin twins a couple of years ago, and Boise State almost pulled off the top 5 upset in Boise, except for the late 3-pointer. And then last year, Boise State was without Abu Kijab in that game in the Mountain West tournament, and then Max Rice broke his foot in that game, and then Boise State scored 82 points, and yet it wasn't enough because of what the trio did of Cambridge and Washington and Sherfield. So it seems like there's been some pretty good battles. I'm going to check the numbers today, but I think it's been 4, 5, 6 years at least since I think Boise State's won in Reno. So what do you make of this series? The games are usually pretty competitive, but Nevada has had the upper hand here in recent years.
I think it's a rivalry. I mean, I think to a degree, it's not obviously Nevada, Boise State in football. There's not as much history and I guess major stakes when these teams have played each other. But I do think these teams look at each other and they say, okay, we're some of the best teams in the Mountain West. You obviously had those Musselman years where Nevada was at the top of the conference, but for the majority of it, these have been, the top 3 or 4 teams in the conference, usually chasing San Diego State. So I think Nevada probably looks at Boise State and vice versa, that if we want to go out there and win a Mountain West championship, these are the kind of games that we have to win. These are the kind of programs we have to be better than. And for the most part, Nevada's done a very good job of that. There's been some very competitive games. You mentioned that win that Nevada had at Boise State when they were ranked top 10 in the nation. Cody Martin hitting a rare 3 for him back then. He actually leads the NBA in 3-point shooting this year, which is kind of a weird stat given that wasn't really his MO at Nevada. But I think this is a huge litmus test game every single year, and I don't think it's any different this year. I think Nevada wants to prove it can beat the better teams on its schedule. That's certainly something it has not been able to do this year. I mean, they have not won a quad 1 or a quad 2 kind of game. This is a team that's mostly beaten the lesser opponents on their schedule and lost to the better teams on their schedule, except for maybe George Mason, which is a pretty good team this year. So I think Nevada has a lot to prove in terms of can they be one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the Mountain West, beat teams like Boise State, Colorado State, Utah State, San Diego State. They haven't had that opportunity yet because some of these games have been canceled. Their game against Wyoming canceled. Their game against San Diego State also postponed. This is really their first opportunity to maybe send a message in the Mountain West that they are a team that, despite the struggles in non-conference, they're a team that really thinks that they should be getting a bye in the first round of the Mountain West tournament. And if all goes right, maybe finish top 2 or 3 in the conference.
Yeah, Boise State obviously feels that as well. So this is a nice early season, litmus test game for both teams. What are the issues with Nevada? Because Boise State fans, they look at the stats and they see, Cambridge 17.4 points per game. They see Sherfield 18.8. You got the former 5-star center Will Baker on the roster now. You have what Washington did. I mean, you look at the pieces and you wonder why this team was losing to some of the teams they were. I mean, what are the issues when Nevada's struggling?
Well, there was some kind of a culture issue. I mean, they were playing zero defense at the beginning of the season. They were getting absolutely torched on the defensive end of the ball. That's why they started 1-4, and then they kicked A.J. Brahma off the team. This is a guy who at Robert Morris last year averaged better than 20 points, better than 10 rebounds per game. He originally transferred to Arizona State this offseason. He spent about a month there, and then he transferred to Nevada. There was just a schism there. Everybody was not on the same page. He was taken off the team, and since that point, Nevada's been very, very good, and their defense has been great. Outside of that Kansas game, they've basically held every opponent to 38% shooting or better. So those were the issues early in the season. And I think you look at the offensive end, you have your stars. Grant Sherfield is as good as he was last year. Desmond Cambridge, a very good offensive player who brings a lot of energy on defense. And then 2 really good big guys. I mean, Nevada starts 2 7-footers, Warren Washington, Will Baker, both averaging in excess of 11 points per game. Well, that's kind of been it. I mean, the whole talk about this team is it's going to be the deepest team Nevada's had in a long time. Corey Barnett, who's an assistant coach on the team, he played at Indiana. He was at UCLA for 6 seasons, including 3 Sweet 16s, said this is the deepest team he's ever been a part of. That certainly has not played out. Taking A.J. Brahma, who was averaging double digits off the team, certainly didn't help. But outside of those 4 guys, everybody else on the team has not offered a lot on offense. That Nevada had 2 true freshmen starting last year, Trey Coleman, Daniel Foster. They've both taken a major step back offensively. They added a transfer from FAU, Keenan Blackshear, comes from a very well-regarded basketball family. He has not been as good offensively as Nevada was expecting. Now, 2 of those guys, Coleman and Blackshear, was phenomenal against New Mexico, and that's what they need. They need that 4th and 5th contributor on the offensive end to beat some of these better teams. And up to this point, it's really been the 4 stars. That's it. And they're not getting anything else offensively. But I think the biggest change is they're just playing much better defense. And that's why you've seen them play better and post a much better record over the last, basically 6 weeks.
And hearing you say that, it's very interesting because very similar in a lot of ways to Boise State. They kicked Evander Dutrieve off the team, a guy that was a starter and everybody expected huge things from him. He's one of the highest ranked players ever to sign with Boise State. They kick him off the team, the Arizona transfer, and then they've won. They've won I think 7 straight since he was kicked off the team. I don't think they've lost. They moved a freshman into the starting lineup. So there was one game they lost against St. Louis where he was on the bench after losing his starting spot, and then he transferred, and they've won 7 straight. And so it is interesting how culture and chemistry can play such of a role, and maybe another guy getting an opportunity. But what is the thoughts there on Alford? I mean, I know coming in with COVID and all this, and just trying to get the crowd. It's just been tough. Probably this is year 2 for him, right?
Year 3.
Year 3. Oh, it is 3 already. Okay,
so, yeah,
well, it's crazy
1, they lost a lot of good players. They lost the Martin twins. They lost Jordan Caroline. They lost Jordan Brown, a former McDonald's All-American who spent 1 year in Nevada. They lost Trey Porter, Trayshawn Thurman. Both those guys played pro. Both those guys in the starting lineup. But they were not bare. They returned Lindsey Drew, who had sat out that year because of double hip surgery and a torn Achilles. They returned Jazz Johnson, who was an all-conference player. They returned Nisar Azuzwe, who was 6th man of the year the first year under Alford. And then they got Jalen Harris, who was redshirting the previous year under Coach Musselman. He was a second-round draft pick after 1 year at Nevada under Coach Alford. So that first year, he had a pretty good roster, but it was thin. And Nevada finishes second in the Mountain West. They're probably a CBI caliber team, not quite good enough for the NIT. And then you look at last year, they lost all those guys I aforementioned. And Grant Sherfield stepping in and Desmond Cambridge being as good as he was a really big lift for this team. They finished 5th in the Mountain West. So, they fall short of the NIT again. They get to the CBI. Like, you don't hire Steve Alford and give him $12 million over 10 years to be a CBI caliber team. You do that to continue the NCAA tournament pedigree that Nevada had. And I think he gets a little bit of a pass for those first 2 years because of the roster rebuild he had to go through. I mean, 12 months after he got the job, there was only one player on Nevada's roster from the Musselman tenure, that being KJ Himes, a 6'10" reserve big guy. I think this was the year to make that breakthrough. There was top 25 talk. There was Mountain West Championship talk. There was NIT at worst talk. You're going to be in the NCAA tournament if everything breaks right. And now they're sitting here at 7-5, and they lost a number of games that they probably shouldn't have lost. San Diego, they certainly shouldn't have lost to. You look at South Dakota State getting whacked by them. That's not a result that you want to see. Losing to Santa Clara, Fresno State beat Santa Clara. USF, now USF's a good team, but that's a game where they lose by 3 points. I think this year has been disappointing because this was supposed to be that year where you get back to where Coach Musselman kind of had this program. And to this point, it has not happened. Now they're 1-0 in conference play, and they are playing better of late. So maybe they go on a roll and they finish top 3 in the conference. I think they need to do something like that to call this year a success, just because non-conference play was kind of a disaster for this team. So I think the fans still really like Coach Alford, but at some point, you're giving a coach $1.2 million a year, which is where Coach Alford is at right now. He's got 7 more years left on his contract after this, goes all the way up to $1.55 million. Nevada doesn't pay those kinds of salaries. So if you're paying that kind of salary, you want the results of being an NCAA tournament regular to compete for Mountain West championships. And they just have not been at that level the first 2 years. And based on how this year started, it didn't look like they were going to be at that level. We'll see if they can turn things around.
Hey, I want to ask you about Grant Sherfield, but quickly, quick shout out, United Commercial Insurance. Offer all kind of insurance for businesses. Brandon Minert, his staff right here in Boise can write policies in 44 states around the country, whether it's general liability insurance, workers' comp, professional liability insurance, commercial property insurance, business owner policies, commercial automobile liability, cyber insurance, you name it. If you just started your business or if you've been working for decades, United Commercial Insurance offers competitive rates and great service to help manage your business insurance needs. United Commercial Insurance makes it easy for you. Just check out their contact info there on the screen and appreciate their support of Bronco Nation News. And Chris, I wanted to ask you about Grant Sherfield because he looks like an All-American when he plays Boise State. I mean, some of the things that he's done in these games, and I was looking at the stats, in his 3 games against Boise State last year, 29-20 in the regular season, and then had 25, I believe, or he's averaging 25 a game against Boise State in 3 games last year. Cambridge averaging 23 against Boise State as well. So those 2 guards averaging almost 50 points a game against Boise State last year. What is it about Sherfield and maybe Cambridge too, where those guys are just such dynamic players, and obviously against Boise State, they've performed very, very well in the past?
Yeah, I would say Grant Sherfield looks like an All-American against anybody he plays. This is a former top recruit committed to UCLA when Coach Alford was there. Coach Alford gets fired. He eventually signs with Wichita State. He's originally from Wichita. His grandparents lived there. He grew up the high school years in Texas. So kind of picked Wichita State because that was home. Everything blew up with that program with Grant Marshall and he getting kicked out. That Grant transfers back over to Nevada to play for Coach Alford finally. And he's just a very calm, cool, collected player. Like, he's a guy who the game does not speed up on. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's not like the most athletic guy. He's not shooting 40% from three. So, when you project him to the NBA, I don't know that he has an NBA standout skill, but he's just a guy that kind of does everything really well on the court. He can score from all three levels. He can get to the basket. He can get to the free throw line. He can make threes, shooting 70 or 37% from there. Really, really good in the mid-range game, which makes him difficult to defend. I know that's not a very popular part of people's games now, but 19 points per game, almost 7 assists. He's rebounding at a really high clip, 5 rebounds per game. He's playing better on defense. He lost about 10 pounds in the offseason, gives him a little bit more endurance. This is a guy who can damage you in a lot of different ways. And he showed last year he's really good in clutch situations. He had 3 game winners, including one against Boise State. He had 2 more where he tied the game in the last 10 seconds. So this is the best player on Nevada's roster for sure. He's one of the 3 or 4 best players in the Mountain West. You look at Des Cambridge. This is a guy who's just a really good shooter. He doesn't shoot the highest percentage, but when he gets going, he can put 6 or 7 3-pointers on you. And at that point, it makes things very difficult for the opposition. So those are really Nevada's 2 go-to guys. And I think they're really good in the post as well. Not a lot of teams in the Mountain West have 2 legitimate 7-footers averaging, at least 10 points per game. So that's a challenge for opposition's defenses, but it's also an opportunity because those 2 guys do play together quite a bit. So if you can shoot the 3 and stretch those guys out to the 3-point line with your perimeter players, which a lot of teams have tried to do, and hit those threes, then Nevada's defense can be compromised to a degree. But yeah, Grant Sherfield, when he plays well, Nevada wins. They actually got away with one against New Mexico. He only made 2 field goals. He did have a double-double, 10 assists, but it was a rare off game for him, and that's why those other guys, the Trey Colemans, the Keenan Blackshears, really had to step up. The big men played really well in that game. But you could pretty much put Grant in for at least 15 points, at least 8 assists. The big question is, can he get a triple-double? Nevada hasn't had one since 1979, and he's come 1 rebound and 1 assist short in 2 separate games this year. So that's kind of a goal for him, but obviously not the main goal.
You said putting in 15. I think you can put in about 25 against Boise State with what he's done last year. I know this is a very scary game for Boise State fans, regardless of how well or not well Nevada's playing or how well Boise State's playing. I know the Ken Pom numbers have it as like a 1-point game, a pick 'em. So it should be an exciting game. And you mentioned the big guys, Washington. I think he had 18 and 11 against Boise State in the Mountain West tournament. And then Will Baker, I was watching that Kansas game, and he can shoot the 3-ball too. It is a very interesting dynamic to have 2 elite guards like that and then 2 7-footers. It is not a unique combination you see very often.
And people will say, okay, well, then why aren't they great? You have 2 all-conference guards, first or second team, and then you have 2 legitimate 7-footers who have been very productive. What's the issue? At the beginning, it was the defense. The 3-point shooting has not been as good as expected. This has been Alford's worst 3-point shooting team during his tenure at Nevada. The Wolfpack's only shooting 33.8% from 3, so that's kind of an issue. And then just the wing play hasn't been great. But, this is a team that's won 6 of their last 7 games, so they are, starting to hit a little bit of that ceiling. It just seems every time they run into a top 100 team, they haven't really played a good game, and a lot of them have been blowouts. So that's kind of my curiosity levels. Can Nevada can they beat a good team? Can they beat a top 100 caliber team? Certainly the talent is there, and I think that's some of the frustration for the start of the season is Nevada returned all 5 starters from last year, and then they added 3 transfers, one being the 5-star kid, Will Baker. You expected them to take that next step forward, and, it can be a long season. It's taken some time to gel and for everybody to fit together. But, the talent is not an issue on this team. And Coach Alford, the coaching is not an issue on this team either. They had to get the chemistry right. They had to get everybody on the same page. They've simplified what they're doing on offense quite a bit. And, this team, if they play to their potential, is certainly capable of beating anybody in the Mountain West. This is a very talented team.
Well, and I think wouldn't shock Boise State fans at all if they look like a top 25 type team tomorrow night. They always seem to play well against Boise State. Before I let you go, final thing, just Mountain West as a whole. I know you cover the league as a whole, and we saw what San Diego State did to Colorado State last Saturday, a 30-point win. What's just your take on this league? And San Diego State, also a team that had a couple, I don't want to say puzzling losses, but obviously lost a couple in the non-conference season as well. Where you at? It does seem like there's a lot of quality teams here, 5, 6 teams, in the top 100 of the net rank. rankings. I mean, from top to bottom, it seems like the Mountain West is maybe as a whole better than it's been in a while, but we're still looking for that 1 or 2 or 3 kind of dominant top 25 level teams.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the top is good. There's no like, Nevada from a couple years ago or San Diego State from 2 years ago. There's no what I would call an elite top 10 kind of team. The bottom is much better. Like there are not as many like guaranteed wins. You've already seen Air Force beat Utah State. Air Force and San Jose State last year were really, really bad. New Mexico last year was really bad. Like, the sub 200 teams are gone. And you really do have a bunch of like 5 or 6 teams that believe they can make it to the NCAA tournament and realistically could get there with what they did in non-conference, from your Boise States, your Colorado States, your Utah States, your San Diego States. Wyoming didn't beat a bunch of great teams, but they've been able to manufacture a really good net rating. And then you have Nevada there as well. I mean, right now there's really only one lock for the NCAA tournament, Colorado State. And that's kind of an issue for a conference that's been at 1 or 2 bids for the last couple of years. They really need to get back to being 3 or 4 bids. And I think they can get there, but there's a lot more depth in terms of the bottom of the conference and not quite as elite at the top of the conference. So realistically, I think you could point to 4 or 5 teams that could make a run and win a Mountain West title, or at least a Mountain West tournament, get hot over 3 days. So I think the league is in a good place, but you really do want that lead dog. It's kind of the issue they had in football this year. I thought the Mountain West was really good in football this year. They had 2 teams who finished in the final AP top 25, but they didn't have that landmark team like Cincinnati in the AAC, and they continued to lack that. But they had 8 teams in a bowl. They went 5-1 in bowls. I feel like it's very similar in basketball, where there's a lot of depth at the top, where you do have, maybe top 25, 30% of the nation kind of teams, but you don't have that one standout team. I mean, obviously Colorado State going 10-0 in conference play, was that team, but what happened to them at San Diego State does raise some questions. It's a very good team, but Nevada beat that team last year as well. I don't think anybody is scared of Colorado State based on their personnel. It's a good team. I don't know. It's a team that can go out and win NCAA tournament games. That'll be the big question for them when they get there, because I think that team's going to make the tournament. I think San Diego State's probably going to make the tournament now that they're healthier. The rest of the teams are kind of fighting at that NIT level at this stage.
Well, appreciate your insight and your time, Chris. Folks can find you on Twitter by Chris Murray. You can see the last name is AY there, by Chris Murray on Twitter. And looking forward to getting to Reno tomorrow and seeing you out at the Lawler Event Center, Chris. Appreciate your time. Should be a good game, and at least it's hopefully a game, which we've not been having many of lately. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. It should be interesting, and we appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. See you in Reno.
There he is, Chris Murray. You can read his work, Nevada Sports Net. Does a great job both writing and on the TV side as well, and appreciate him for coming on the show today. And again, big one for Boise State tomorrow. I've got the full preview up, BroncoNationNews.com. You can go check the story out. Talked to Coach Leon Rice yesterday, got some quotes in there. Sounds like a lot of the players came down with COVID. It wasn't just a small issue. He said we were hit, and we were hit pretty hard. He said quite a large number came down, so they've had to cancel the past 3 games, but they've been out there practicing for the last 4 days or so, and they should be good to, hopefully, fingers crossed, board a flight to Reno and have the game tomorrow night against Nevada. So Nevada's coming off the pause as well, so I guess nothing's official until we see both teams on the court and the officials tomorrow, and I will be weather permitting, travel permitting, all things at Lawler Event Center in Reno tomorrow night for Bronco Nation News. We'll have the live post-game show, but looking forward to getting out there and getting the scene, and we'll have the full coverage there, again, courtside from the Lawler Event Center. The game is at 8:30 Mountain Time, 7:30 Pacific. It will air on Fox Sports 1. So full coverage to come. Bronco Nation News, BroncoNationNews.com. If you're not a subscriber, hopefully you'll consider one. It's just $70 for a full year, $6.99 a month if you want to go that route, and you get access to all kinds of exclusive emails and recruiting stories, breaking news, all kinds of stuff, and you help us be able to go cover the games on the road with travel expenses and things like that. So appreciate folks for checking it out. Again, it's going to be a tough game tomorrow. In 3 games last year against Boise State, Grant Sherfield averaged 25 points a game. Dustin Cambridge averaged 23. So 2 players averaging 48 points per game against Boise State last season. And if you finally slow them down, well, as you just heard, 2 7-footers in Warren Washington and Will Baker to deal with down on the interior. So got to keep Mladen Armouche out of foul trouble. That's obviously going to be one of the huge keys to the game tomorrow, is not get Mladen in foul trouble, or there could be some issues in this one. So appreciate our sponsors, rowpaint.com, the official paint and coatings company of Boise State Athletics. Our road trip tomorrow sponsored by Idaho Central Credit Union, iccu.com. If for all your banking, personal and business needs, looking forward to having Idaho Central Credit Union on board now as a sponsor as well, and they'll help support our road trip coverage and help sponsor us on the road here at Bronco Nation News, bronconationnews.com. So thanks to Chris Murray, Nevada Sportsnet, for joining us. Thanks to you as well. Bronco Nation News, bronconationnews.com. A lot of exciting things we're working on, a lot of cool things moving forward with the website. So stay with us, and hopefully you're enjoying what we're doing here at bronconationnews.com. We got plenty more for you moving forward, but we'll start tonight with the Tyler Rasa show. We'll be back tonight. Tyler Rasa will join me 8 o'clock, I believe. We'll talk some football. I think Daniel Cantrell, the long snapper, scheduled to join us. So looking forward to that. And then I will head to Reno tomorrow, and we'll talk to you from the Lawler Events Center before Boise State and Nevada tomorrow night. Game time again, 8:30 Mountain Time on Fox Sports 1. Thanks to Chris Murray. Thanks to you guys. Thanks to my wife. Thanks to everybody. It's been fun. Bronco Nation News, bronconationnews.com.